then define heresy in our, like you mentioned orthodoxy, and you've defined it by the creeds, but there's a lot of stuff then that I would presume you would call heresy, being an Protestant evangelical Southern Baptist. How do we then, when is the proper way to call heresy a heresy? Or when do we do that?
Yeah. Well, I think we got to be careful with the H word, because I think people use heretics way too frequently. And so that you don't actually have the gravity of heresy when you really need it. Like, to be like, you know what I mean? Like when someone actually is a heretic, if everybody that disagrees with you is already a heretic, then you don't really have the gravity of that word. Heresy is when a fundamental truth of the gospel or Christian teaching is fundamentally denied, or so obscured as to be a functional denial of orthodoxy itself. So in between that are errors, and there's all kinds of errors. There are minimal errors, and there are errors that grow in their significance, and there are very significant errors that are not necessarily heresy, but extraordinarily damaging, right? So I don't think we want to just say, oh, well, there are heretics over here and the Orthodox over here, and all of us are in error in some way, so I guess we don't need to worry about errors. That's not the way it works. Yeah, we all are in error in some way, and the Lord will have to straighten us all out, because otherwise we'd all be in agreement. But we should be on guard against errors, because errors lead to heresy, and they can also take us over the cliff. There are positions, though, when you basically go against something that the church has always taught and believed and practiced, and has been basically the universal position of the church. The burden's on you to show how that's in line with orthodoxy, not the other way around. And so for example, today the big questions are over, sexuality and marriage. Like, can we agree to disagree on this? Can we just can we say it's an error or not, or whatnot? What you see in the denominations where that's being debated is it's fascinating, because 10 years ago, the revisionists were the ones who were saying, we just need to agree to disagree on this. This isn't in the creeds. It's not a gospel issue. Why can't we just be inclusive enough to include both perspectives in our denomination? Today, that's not what is seen. Today, it's the revisionists saying this is a gospel issue. If we're not inclusive, we're actually going against the fundamental teachings of Jesus. This is what it means for us to be a Christian in our society today and whatnot. We've got to repent of our past, and we have to change our position. So it's fascinating to see that shift in 10 years. But the burden of proof is on the revisionists, because they're actually taking a position that goes against the unchanging witness of the church. Until about 50 years ago, all churches everywhere, and even now, it's against the global church. So it's generally a shrinking subset of predominantly white Western liberal denominations that is jumping on this bandwagon, and the rest of the global church is saying, that this is not. So now you may ask the question, okay, is that a heresy? I would just take it one step below to say the presenting issue is the doctrine of marriage. The heresy that is there is not the change in position on marriage. It's the underlying anthropology that leads to that. So it's the question of humanity, what it means to be created in the image of God, male and female, good in his image, oriented toward a particular end. That is what the heresy is, a denial and obscurity and a fundamental distortion of that, which is the iceberg underneath the surface. So the denominations are wrecking on the iceberg of same-sex marriage, but same-sex marriage in itself is not the heresy as much as it's the expression of the anthropological heresy that's underneath, and which then connects to Christological heresies and other things. This is why on this particular issue itself, one of the ways you can tell a spot of heresy is that generally other parts of Christianity, other parts of Christian teaching begin to crumble. So it's why virtually almost everybody that jumps on and says, hey, I am completely Orthodox, I'm just going to tweak my understanding of marriage and sexuality, it doesn't work. Within 10, 15 years, I mean, I could name names right now, go down the list of people who are suddenly, then they're universalists, then they no longer believe in the atonement. Then they're suddenly, questioning the existence of God as a person altogether, the nature of calling God Father, and things like that. So you wind up like that particular thing that you think is not an essential. It shows itself to be a load-bearing wall in the house because of the way that the rest of the house crumbles after you remove it. So I think that's one of the ways. I think we got to be more careful in how we use the heretic word, but then we also have to recognize when heresy does its damage. Like you can watch it happen in real time, and then together with the global church and the church throughout history, say, bring additional clarification and definition to the question.